If you're studying your GCSEs right now, or if you're going to study your GCSEs, one of the topics that you will probably cover is called social influence. So this is how people are affected by their surroundings and by the people that are around them. Depending on what spec you're going to do, you'll be learning about different things, but for most specs, you'll probably be learning about 4 concepts. So that is conformity, obedience, bystander effect, and de-individuation. Now, each of these have a corresponding study that you'll learn about. Some may be in depth, some just as passing, to help you understand. So for conformity, the experiment that you'll probably look at is Ashe's line experiment, which we'll go through. For obedience, you'll go through Milgram's shock experiment. For de-individuation, you'll be going through Zimbardo's prison experiment. And for the bystander effect, you'll probably go through Piliavin's subway experiment. So let's go through each one of those in turn, and let's see what they're about. So first one is conformity. So this is Ashe's line experiment. So in this experiment, he had a picture of a line, and all the participants had to do is match that line with in length to a selection of other lines. So multiple choice. So is this line the same length as line A, line B, or line C on this other chart, right? So participants would shout out their answer, A, C, B, right? The participants in the room will be agreeing, blah, blah, but eventually they will start saying the wrong one on purpose, right? So the other people in the room will start saying the wrong one on purpose because everyone, bar one person, is part of the experiment. They're what's called a confederate, okay? So they will start saying the wrong line on purpose, and what you'll find is, based on various other factors, the participant will start complying. So depending on how many people are in the room, how close they are, lots of other factors depends on how likely they are to start to conform with everyone else and say the same answer as everyone else, even though they know it's wrong. Something as simple as judging the length of a line on a piece of paper, all right? In teaching in the classroom, there's a couple of ways you can do this. One way that we've done it in the classroom is sending a student out, asking them to go onto an errand. This is easy if you're co-teaching. Ask them to go out on an errand, pick up some paper. Oh, I forgot my paper in the office. All right, they'll go out of the classroom. Then you'll let all the other students know, right, this is what's going to happen. We're going to do this task, blah, blah. You're all going to say the wrong answer. Let's see if the person we've sent out, when they come back, let's see if they conform. So in the classroom, you'll have one student that comes back in. Maybe it's counting how many claps you do. And you can disguise the experiment as like a memory test, like, oh, count how many claps I do. I see how good your memory is, how many you can get up to. And you'll clap out different patterns. And then the whole class you'll pick them out at random, what do you think, what do you think? And they'll start saying the wrong answer. And the person that you sent out, when they come back in and they do this task, they will start conforming with people. Maybe they'll be reluctant at the start, but then they'll start saying, oh yeah, definitely, yeah. So the second concept that you'll learn about is the idea of obedience. To define obedience is to do what you are told by an authority figure. So that's a very important distinction, doing what you're told by an authority figure, not just by anyone, not just by your friends, by a person in authority. Okay, so the experiment that you'll do for this is Milgram's shock experiment. So you'll look into this extremely famous experiment whereby people had to, again, it's under the guise of a memory test where people had to shock participants with electricity based on how well their memory was. Okay, but unknown, again, to the participant, is that there wasn't actually someone in the room. There were pre-recorded screams. So, they'd stop responding, they shocked them, and they'd keep going. And what was crazy about this study is how many people went all the way up to the highest shock level, or went past to where even on the machine it says, no, this is deadly. Don't go past this point. It's almost everybody, right? So that is the experiment you do for that. That is fascinating because one of the reasons that experiment was done was because people are curious about Nazi Germany, right? So the Second World War, how can so many people conform? How can so many people obey the orders of the people around them to do extremely, extremely horrible acts? Is it the people themselves, or is it the situation that they're in? Is that the problem? And then this experiment was, a simulated situation to see how many people would do something like what they thought was kill someone. So the next one is the bystander effect. So for this study, you would do, for this concept, you'll do the study of Piliavin and his subway experiment. So this is on an actual New York subway, so natural environment, they go out. And what they do is they have someone, again, pretending, dressed up, either as a drunken person or as an old person. And what this experimenter would do is they would fall over at some time during the train journey, and then there was other people around in the subway to measure all kinds of things. So who helped them up first? Did anyone help them up? How long it took them? How many people, right? All these kind of factors were taken into consideration. So this is to do with the bystander effect, because it turns out a lot of people just walk past incidences all the time on the street. They don't help people out as much as you would think, okay, or you'd like to think. And the situation depends on whether you're going to help them out. There's lots of factors that you'll learn about in GCSE Psychology about the kind of things that influence how likely someone is to help. So mood, for example, could be a big thing, whether they are genuinely late for something. So a lot to do with the person themselves, sometimes to do with the situation. So in Piliavin's experiment, it was a drunk person or old person, right? Which one's more likely to be helped up? Obviously, the old person it was more likely to be helped than the drunken looking person, right? Because you kind of put responsibility on the drunk person, whereas you don't do that for old age, okay? And the last one you might learn about is de-individuation. So this is losing your individuality, de-individuation, individuality, all right? And for this, the experiment that you might learn about is Zimbardo's prison experiment, or Haney-Banks-Zimbardo, right? And this was is a famous experiment in which it was a simulated prison environment. That's what the experiment was, to see how people would act. Now, this experiment was supposed to go on for 2 weeks just to observe what would happen, take in the data, let's see what would happen in this environment. There was a simulated prison experience. So the participants, yes, they got paid for the study. The participants were split either into, look, you're either prison guards or you're prisoners, and it was just random allocation as to who got what role, okay? So it was a role they were playing, they wore the uniform, they had the equipment, and they tried to play the part, right? And that's how I think a lot of the participants saw it, as we're just gonna play this part. However, the experiment, it was supposed to last 2 weeks, but it only lasted 6 days because it had to get shut down because of how unethical it had become. The participants started acting in very unusual ways, being very aggressive, which is obviously extremely unethical, and they couldn't allow the experiment to go on for longer than it did. What the Zimbardo experiment showed, the prison experiment, is that you can lose your identity, especially if you're wearing uniform, right? So in GCSE, that's the kind of big thing that you need to know about, is the idea of wearing a uniform, playing a part, even unconsciously, can kind of strip away some of your individuality. So some of the choices that you would have otherwise made, but you change your choices, you change your behavior because you're now playing this role, okay, to oversimplify it. So you can imagine this happens in all kinds of things in real life. So you can imagine riots on the streets, people are wearing particular clothing. If you're wearing a balaclava, right, you're kind of losing your individuality because you're not wearing your normal clothes, your face isn't on show, and you might start acting in ways that you wouldn't otherwise. And there's millions of other examples, right? When you're at work, when you're at school, you're wearing a uniform, and that might help you or hinder you to act in different ways. So sometimes they might be good ways that you act, sometimes they might be bad ways. And that is what the Zimbardo experiment showed, is that if you take on the role of something and you play this part even unconsciously, then you begin to lose your individuality. You start to make decisions that you wouldn't otherwise have made.